This episode of the Better 2 podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needom, author of My Days with the Dark Muse, as well as Love is Worth Waiting For. Hi gang, Donna here. Thanks for tuning into the Better 2 podcast. Today's guest is Angel Ribo. Angel and I have a very interesting conversation about humanity and about divisiveness and how our world has taken a turn into that direction that is not so good. So we kind of dig deep in what's going on in the world. So by the time this airs, a lot of the things we talked about hopefully will be over. But then again, it could be just getting started. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Angel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Fantastic. What about you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. So you have an adventure basically, because you did not start, you're located in Texas now, but you grew up in Colombia, did you not?
In Spain.
Spain, okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you went from Spain to Texas.
Exactly. So throughout my, let's say when I was a child, my mom and dad were kind enough, or maybe visionary enough, to put me through, language lessons, foreign languages lessons. So when I was in the school, like the normal school, I was taking, French as a second language since I think 7th grade or 6th grade. And at the same time, outside the school, I was also started at 6th or 7th grade. I started to go to a private academy for, to learn English. So fast forward, I ended my basic education, up to 12th grade, knowing really how to speak French and English. And then when I went to college and I was part of an international organization when I was in college, it was very natural to me. I was able to speak English and French and Spanish and Catalan language also, which is the language you speak in the northeast of Spain. And also I started learning Portuguese. So I wanted to have an international experience. I found it difficult for me to find the right experience at home in Barcelona, in this case, where I could use all my, language skills. So actually, I moved to the UK. I actually applied to a job while in Spain for a position in London, and I won. I was the. They were looking for a candidate in Spain, and I won that place. So I moved to the UK, and a few years later, the same company I was working with, which was actually an American company, I asked them if I could move to Latin America. They said yes. So I was then in Latin America. And then another company I was working with 11 years ago, they told me that, they proposed to me if I wanted to move my family and myself to Texas, or to the US actually. And I said yes. And that was, again, 11 years ago, and I've been in Texas since then. So it was all like, job related and opportunities that opened up, and my language skills, all those things, and obviously making, progress in my professional career. They opened to me so many opportunities that I ended up Texas. And actually I chose Texas, to any other place in the country, and they had probably like 30 plus offices and places I could move to, but I chose Texas. And I'm so glad I did. So glad.
Where about in Texas do you live?
Yeah, I live north of Dallas in a place called Plano. It's a suburb in the north.
I used to live in Richardson.
Look at that. Oh my God. How cool is that?
It's very cool.
Yeah, for the audience that doesn't know or don't know, where these places are. Richardson and Plano are two of the suburbs north of Dallas, which is, it's like being neighbors. Mm-hmm. How cool is that? And actually, Donna and myself, we had not we had exchanged a few emails, but we had not talked about this. So how cool is that?
No, it was really weird when I lived in Dallas, because it was like, if you cross one road, there was a grocery store, and that was Dallas still. But if you cross the road where my apartment was, I was in Richardson. Exactly. And if you looked at the phone bill, it was Plano. So it was like, okay. Go figure this out. But that was back in the early 90s. So we did not cross paths at the same time. But yes, small world. True, definitely exactly. A small world. So I have to ask, because, there's a lot of people I've talked to in the past about fear, and you made some drastic changes, and I've moved around a lot in my life too. So how did you get past the fear of, not only just moving, for me, I've just moved across the country. But for you, you're changing, dare I say nationality, this in language. And granted, you had the potential to speak those languages, but still there's customs and everything else. So was there any time that you thought, am I making the right choice?
That's a great question. And actually, let me add to that, I lived in total in my life, I think I've lived in 7 or 8 different countries. I've lost count now. And to be honest, every time I reflect about my international life and, moving to one country to another, and also on top of that, due to my job, I had to actually conduct business in more than 30 countries in the world. So, you know what? I never considered me moving to another country from a perspective of fear, but rather from a perspective of literally of excitement, of adventure. I always thought that it was an adventure. And even like, wow, I'm going to free myself from what I am now, and I'm going to go to another place which is going to bring me, additional, as you said, customs and many other things, right? The people think differently, people speak a different language. I will have to adapt to the ways that society, work and conduct themselves in that area. But it was always with, always it was with excitement. And I took it like this. I have to tell you, I have to confess that I'm going to confess that because I know that you probably are going to understand me very well, and also your audience, which is I understood maybe why instead of fear, I always felt excitement. And that's a little bit of a story. So like 4 years ago, a very good friend of mine offered herself to basically help me with some, let's say, spiritual work, okay? Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm going to study you and your birth date and everything, and I'm going to tell you who you were before incarnating in this world. I said, wow, that's going to be exciting. And she told me that 7 lifetimes ago, I was a Templar knight. It was a Templar knight. So for those of you that maybe haven't heard about the Templars were basically defending, let's say the faith. They were defending the good manners of, in the Middle Ages in Europe, the south of Europe. They were very close to the church at that time, to the Catholic Church. And anyway, they were also very enigmatic group of people at that time. There's a lot of books and stories written about them. And I would say I have inherited that, way of thinking and that spirit of, looking for the looking for adventures, and also being open to also fight for the specific causes. You know what I mean? So, mm-hmm. and although I've never been a good horse rider, to be honest, but regardless, I've always felt that I had a sword with me. One time my brother came to visit, and he brought to me a big, massive statue of Archangel Michael. And if you know, Archangel Michael always carries a sword, right? Mm-hmm. And I moved from after a few years, I moved from one house to another, and the sword disappeared. We don't know where the sword went. I mean, where did it go? And someone told me once, Angel, you never lost that sword. Actually, what happened is that you carry it with you. So, it's so funny how things get together. And sometimes I have this feeling that my life has been like a puzzle of many different things that all, come together so perfectly, flawlessly to make me the person that I am today. I don't know if I was able to answer your question.
No, you did. I mean, and as far as reincarnation and astrology and all that stuff, I read tarot cards and stuff, so I don't have a problem with that. And honestly, I think that, maybe you haven't been a horse rider in this lifetime. Maybe in a lifetime between those 7 lifetimes, you had a horse riding accident or something. You never know, because there's still all those other lives that you've experienced, and they make us a whole. There's people that are coming. There are people that come into our lives that we feel an instant connection to. And we can feel energy from them because we've been connected with them on some plane of existence. So
exactly, yeah, I agree. Also, at the same time, sometimes we are so entrenched in our physical 3D world that we live in that sometimes, not everybody is exposed to the same experience, the same knowledge. But yeah, I agree with you 100%, Donna.
I mean, I had a reading a few years ago or about a year ago where the lady's like, I don't do past life stuff, but I guarantee you the way your body is, you were in war, you were a combat person because your body is so damaged. And it's like, okay, but it makes a lot of sense because sometimes your body does things and you're like, how did that happen to me? Because you're still carrying those past life traumas. Yeah. And I talk a lot about on the podcast about generational trauma, but it's still, we tend to reincarnate with people that are in the same soul group. So that's why some of these people seem very similar. That's why we have the energy connection. And sometimes it's just working past these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Very often. Yeah. I mean, I have had this feeling that very often I attract the people, I attract like-minded people or people that have some, similar thoughts very, very often to my life. So yeah, that definitely, again, I think that there's a lot that we are not taught about when we go to school, but I think it's really relevant to our lives. And probably, as you know, I'm very involved in children education. And I think that the education that our kids receive should be a little bit like brushed up with additional subject matters.
I think, yes, we need to learn how to read. We need to learn science. We need to learn history. I agree with all of those things. But we also need to learn meditation, self-care, stress management, and the fact that, dare I say, as much as people want to say Star Wars is just this mass merchandise thing, the underlying message about us all being connected is a very true statement. But we don't see it that way. But we are. I mean, there's times when somebody's going to call and then the phone rings and it's them. That is, your intuition. That is the connection we share. But people don't always see it.
Exactly.
They don't want to see it.
Yeah. Because, the unknown is always brings you uncertainty, and uncertainty brings anxiety and fear. You were talking about fear before. So, but for some reason, it's like, what's going on in the world right now. Correct. I mean, we've been like 22 months with a complete, shift, and regardless of where everybody stands, regardless of division, regardless of opinions, of science or not science, it doesn't matter. The reality is that things have changed a little bit, and with so many things happening, and for the first time in history happening at the same time in every single country in the world, I think it's a great time to talk about critical thinking, about discernment, right? And many other things. Again, adding to that list that you just made about what kids should learn in school, about critical thinking, just one,
yes,
just one period, maybe not daily, but one period a week about critical thinking, how to bring discernment to humans, to human life. So everybody makes up their mind, and everybody, tries to find additional answers or learn how to go inside of them to find these answers.
But it's much easier if you're not taught critical thinking, because then I can show you the news or I can show you something on social media and you're going to be much more gullible to believe it.
Totally.
And I mean, like right now, when you think about it, I've been honest about this. Before my husband died, I quit watching the news because all it was about the pandemic, and he'd end up upset because he was dying and he knew he was dying, and it was just adding to it. So I quit watching. The last time I watched the news was on January 6th, when they attacked Capitol. Other than that, I'll catch a news story here or there. I refuse to watch it because a lot of it is just fear mongering. It's not that it's not fact, but I use the accident in Milwaukee. The fact that we allege that this guy ran into the crowd. Yeah. He drove a car into the crowd. And while the news would like to paint it as an accident, the truth is it was an intentional act. Was it a terrorist act? Well, you can't say it was a terrorist act because he wasn't a terrorist, but it did cause terror. But it was an intentional act. And here's why they won't say it's an intentional act. Because number one, if I say it's an accident, well, it can still be covered by insurance. If I say it's an intentional act, guess what? All those people that were injured can't collect from this guy. But it also creates a narrative then. We create a different narrative by saying it was an accident instead of saying he did this on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And words mean a lot. So words can create fear.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, again, it's like, I mean, obviously it's been a very frustrating, I mean, it's been a difficult time for all of us on Earth, probably the last 22 months, right? But at the same time, I myself am a very optimistic guy, and I am really literally taking this as an opportunity to unlearn. I'm very often called to talk to or to teach to entrepreneurs. There's a business accelerator here in Dallas that they call me to give away seminars and webinars to people. And last year I was talking about the power of unlearning, and I was suggesting every single entrepreneur, there's a lot of startup CEOs attending those webinars, and I was telling the CEOs, I think that it would be wise if you try to learn something that maybe is not useful to you anymore. And as you said, when you realize that maybe things don't add up, or you see that narrative that you just mentioned, why don't you start also thinking, like, say, okay, so is it possible that there might be something else that I have taken for granted throughout my entire life that maybe it might not be so true, right? And then you start analyzing. So for me, it has been honestly, I have never in my entire life probably had a more intense, like 22 months period, because of what I have learned, what I have read, the research I've done. I remember starting a path of research about, diseases and germs and these things. I ended up in the 19th century, in the 1800s, looking at manuscripts from a specific scientist that was talking about a specific theory that unfortunately didn't make it through didn't cut through all the noise of that time, because what you mentioned today about media is the same of what was happening at that time with media. It's like there's certain things in life or in humanity that have been repeating themselves over and over and over again. And so had we not had what we are having today in the world and the pandemic and everything, I would have never gone to the archives of foreign countries looking for those incredible manuscripts with this incredible theory that started to awaken some neurons, neuronal connections, and building new things. And that's it. So how to find the blessing inside those things that might look unfortunate, it's something that I'm telling everybody all the time these days.
It's important that you tell them. And I want to touch back to unlearning things. I mean, growing up here in the US, we would hear one day that eggs are bad for you. And then a couple of months later, a year later, eggs are good for you. And then another 6 months down the road, eggs are bad for you. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because, once again, this is the narrative. And as we sit here, you're talking about unlearning things. We have to unlearn behaviors that we learned from our parents. And I'm not sitting here saying, blame your parents for who you are, because it's not just that, it's the generation. Your generation was taught one way, the new generation is taught a different way. And if we can find some common ground and start unpacking and forgiving people, our parents were raised by our grandparents. They weren't perfect. And our grandparents were raised by their parents. And there was a whole nother, when you really think about it, my grandmother, she was born in 1920. She's gone now, but she lived through some horrendous times. And had she been born just a little bit sooner, she would have lived through the Spanish flu pandemic. So, we have to look at things in a bigger, broader scope and understand that we have to unlearn certain behaviors. It's tantamount to getting past the fear and getting past of relinquishing our control and our self-respect and doing good for others. We need to do that.
Oh yeah, and it's so funny that you mentioned about the X, because just a few, like 2 or 3 weekends ago, there was this foundation that is called Western A Prize, and they organized a convention here in Allen, Texas, called Wise Traditions. Wise Traditions, and they basically was a convention in which we're talking about food, and oh my God, and then we're going to talk about dairy. X is one thing, but dairy is just it's just, how many times have we told that, dairy is bad, or dairy is good, or dairy is bad, dairy is good. So guess what? People were talking about raw milk at that conference. They were talking about raw milk and the blessings of raw milk. And obviously I remember when I was a kid that my grandmother, originally in that ranch, in the north of Spain, in the middle of nowhere, I used to go there for my vacations. And she used to obviously boil. They had some sheep and goats, and they would, boil the milk. And I remember still my grandmother also, or my mother even, buying the milk in those containers. You would go to a place where there would be cows and fill those containers with milk, and then you would boil it and everything. And suddenly I went to 21st century, Allen, Texas. I go to this, conference, and they tell me all the amazing properties of raw milk, when we have been trained about pasteurized milk, pasteurized cheese, pasteurized, you name it, kefir and Greek yogurt and everything. And suddenly you realize that the raw milk has so many properties. It's a probiotic, it has so many vitamins, you name it. It's like an incredible source of health, right? And so I couldn't agree more with what you just said. And also that, that's why it's so important what you do, Donna, which is you're sharing this with the audience. The more people that are exposed to this knowledge, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to believe me. Just do your research. And for instance, you know what I did? So I started drinking raw milk every single day. Not a single germ has attacked me in the last 3-4 weeks. I'm drinking raw milk every single day. I even replaced most of my water with raw milk. It's amazing.
That's for some people, that is going to be the answer. But, the reason why we have had the pasteurized thing is because for so long, money has influenced everything. I've talked about this before. I was on a drug called Nature Thyroid. It was a pharmaceutical, but it had been on the market for 100 years. And it's a non-synthetic thyroid drug. About almost 2 years ago now, somebody decided, it hasn't had proper FDA approval. Mind you, there's 100,000, 200,000 people on it, and we're doing just fine taking it, but no. So now it has to be pulled from the market, and it's going to take at least 5 years before it's approved. And the company that was making it is basically saying, we don't have the funds to get it approved. So now you have to, I have to go through a compound pharmacy to get my medication, but Big Pharma won. So it's interesting that money, I hate to say it. Have you ever heard of George Carlin?
No.
He's a comedian, and he talks about how it's a boys club and they all have money and you're not going to be a member of it. And in a way, that's kind of how it is. I was reading, I saw something today about student loans, and they were talking about how when our president got into his first Senate position, that he said he was with the big banks saying, you can't forgive student loans. You can't file bankruptcy on it. He was one of the biggest supporters for that. And how he is still continuing to do that. And I'm not, I will say this, I have been a Democrat most of my life. So, but I think there's a lot of injustice on both sides. And I think both parties have their hand in the till. And they are not necessarily looking for, and I don't want to get political, but I don't think they're necessarily looking at benefiting the people. It's more about control. Because if they have us distracted and they're using their control to distract us, they can do whatever they want and put whatever they want through. And we won't even be the wiser.
And then to your point before, so what do we do about it, right? What do we do about it? And so are we sources of, last year, the same as you, you have a podcast, and obviously a lot of people, listen to you and listen to your messages and to your guests' messages. So you're a public figure. I mean, you definitely what you do that has definitely a ripple effect in the world, yes. Right? So what is your role? Last year, I was asking myself, what is my role? What should be my role? Regardless of my anxiety, my rage, right? How angry I am, excuse me. I was saying to myself, what should be my role? And I said, well, I'm not going to be part of the separation, of the division, of the judgment, of the judging. I'm going to try to build, as many bridges as I can, because otherwise I'm just feeding to this narrative, and I'm feeding to the anger and to the division. So, okay, so right now we already have, the people that believe whatever. I mean, vaccine-wise or mask-wise or lockdown-wise, you name it. Okay, you name it. There's people for these and cons. There's pros and cons, and the people are here or there. So I decided I'm going to be in the middle. I'm going to help as many people as possible in both sides, just to make sure that we don't forget that there's also some place in the middle. We are not forced to surrender our power to either of the sides. We are not forced. There's no rule that says you have to agree with one. You have to make your own judgment, but at the same time, you decide if you are still going to help people or not. And let me give you a specific example. As you know, obviously, every single country in the world right now is going through different kinds of levels of lack of freedom. Let's put it this way, okay? I'm not going to judge if it's okay or not. It is what it is, And let me mention something. For instance, there's one of the countries that has the most, let's say, lockdowns and individual freedoms restricted is Australia. Let me tell you what's going on in Australia, because obviously there's literally thousands of nurses and people in the medical sector, health sector had been fired because they refused to take certain, injection, whatever that is. So are you going to suddenly, let's say that you are being fired, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of Australian families right now suffering in many ways. You know what's going on? Right now, the communities, the neighborhoods are organizing themselves to make sure that they support one another. And the ones that believe that they had to, let's say, they wanted to keep their jobs and they were going to take a certain injection, they're helping the other ones because they're still part of the same community. Everybody's trying to help each other right now. So there's parallel structures to the existing society right now in Australia of people helping each other genuinely. Just think about your neighbors today. Okay, so just think about your neighbors today where you live. I'm sure that you mentioned political, different political sides. You know who is for one side or for the other. You know who is in the middle. You know who might be a libertarian. You know who is pro something or against something. You know all of this. But you know what? You have lived in peace with them for many years. Mm-hmm. And they are, maybe they're not your friends. But come on, don't tell me that even if they're not your friends, you still sympathize with them. You still feel that if you can give them, a crate of eggs, you're gonna do it. Mm-hmm. If you can help your neighbor, regardless of what they think, regardless of what they have done regarding all this, whole thing going on in the world right now, you're still going to help them. And this is exactly what's happening right now in many places in the world, in the Austrias, in the Canadas, in the Germanys, in places with a lot of restrictions. People are organizing themselves to make sure that they support one another, regardless of what the establishment is telling them and what to do. And again, I'm not even criticizing the establishment. They are doing what they think that they have to do, right? I'm not in agreement with many things that they do, but it's okay. I try to build my own life, and these people are doing that. They are building their own lives, and they are helping each other as much as they can with the means that they have, close to them. And I think that's amazing, Donna. I think that's an incredible, unwanted probably consequence, but that's where the genuine human being, is like the phoenix bird, right? Out of the ashes, right? Yeah. So this is exactly what's happening today. The human being is good. We are good. We are good, and we want good regardless of the external distractions, as you name them, Donna.
Well, and here's the thing. I agree with what you're saying. And I think, there was a time right after 9/11 when that was this country. But since we've had different presidents come in the last 10 years, we have become more divisive in this country. And the fact is, social media adds to that, because social media will sit there and make you hate your neighbor. And, I'm honest, I have not had the vax. And the reason I have not had the vax is because I have severe allergies to medication. And my doctor told me, she's like, I don't want you getting it right now because I don't know. You're one of my highest allergic people. And, what am I going to do if I get it and I have an allergic reaction? So I wear a mask. But what really gets me now is before we had the vaccine, people were talking about it when it first came out. Well, we all need to get vaccinated because we need to protect those that can't be vaccinated. Okay. And now if you go on social media, all you will see is, well, if you're not vaccinated, you should just die. Okay. Thanks for caring. I thought so while Australia and other countries are pulling together, here in the US, I think we are just becoming more toxic toward each other. And it's like, get rid of all the fear mongering, get rid of the labels, be humans, be compassionate, have empathy. You don't know what somebody's going through, and you don't know somebody's reasoning for why they're not doing it. And I can get blasted for that. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I also don't want to get a shot that could take me out because I have a lot of health concerns or health issues. So,
yeah. And again, you use several labels right there. And again, why should I do? I mean, how many immunizations have I got in my life? I don't know, a lot, plenty. Every single time someone told me to have one, that's one thing. So why are certain people called pro or anti? I mean, why? And one of the funniest, it's funny if you look for this perspective, right? One of the funniest, social media things that I saw early, I mean, if I can use sarcasm here, is that it takes almost a warrant for an attorney to get someone else's medical records. Almost a warrant.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, you need to go several legal steps to actually get the medical records of someone if you are in court and you need to investigate something, blah, 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 whatever that is. And this particular post was saying, who the heck, with all due respect, who the heck gave the hostesses of restaurants in America and in the world the warrant, the legal ability to ask you for your specific, vaccination status about, on, SARS-CoV-2, right? Mm-hmm. So isn't it, so that's the power of the whole thing that's happening right now. So if you really scratch the surface, how many things that are being mandated are legal?
Well, we can go, firstly, I was going to say to go off of the HIPAA thing. I mean, when I worked in insurance, we had to have, in order to investigate medical injuries, I had to have you release your records. That was the only way I was going to get them. Secondly, you're talking about what is being put across to us that isn't really legal. Well, 9/11 opened up that Pandora box because we were so willing to just sign up and go, here you go. It's okay. You can do this. You can spy on us. It's okay because it's for the better good. And I'm going to say this. I have flown first class since 9/11. Now, my husband had a little manicure kit. We were boarding the plane. They made him throw away the pair of scissors because that's a weapon. Okay, fast forward another flight because we had a friend who worked. Actually, it was his sibling that worked in the airlines. He gets us a companion pass. So we get the companion pass and we get first class seats, which is awesome. And they proceed to bring us a glass of juice. And I'm not talking a paper cup or a plastic cup. I'm talking a real glass. Then they serve us a meal. And the butter knife has serrations on it. I guess terrorists just don't sit in first class. because you're giving me weapons, are you not? I could break the glass. I could use the knife. And so once again, we're back to the position of, is this political theater? We're willing to go to the airport and, depending on who you are and how sensitive the scanner is, for a while there, being a woman, if you wore an underwire bra, you were getting yanked because you had to be wanded because you were going off. So, I'm not knocking it, but sometimes things are done for theater and they have no meaning, but we're willing to give up our rights. And I know people are going to say, well, if you don't like this, you should leave the country. It's not that I don't like it. It's just, I see too much power being given away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your individual power. So that's the question, right? I mean, why are we giving our individual power away so easily? Why? Again, and that's not that's not the, yeah, but again, but if it's fear, then, should we really do that? I mean, are we really, that's really the thing? Are there other options? So, definitely it's that's why I said it's a very interesting moment to live. Some people are in, again, a lot of people are in fear, obviously, and suffering and everything. But I take this as an incredible lesson. And when I explain this to my to my grandkids, when I will explain this to my grandkids, it will be definitely like it's like when my grandfather was telling me about the Spanish flu year. He was born right a few years before the Spanish flu. And when I was going through the different, I remember in Spain, I went to look for all the different, documents and registries of my entire ancestor history. And I went back to the 1634, something like this. And many people died in that, that 1914, 1917, 1918, died of Spanish flu. It said, they died of the Spanish flu, and it would say that was the reason why they died, blah, blah, blah. So this is definitely a landmark in the history of humanity, right? Yeah. It's going to be, everybody will remember those 2 years. Everybody will remember this. And the thing is, what do we do about it? And how did it serve you? How did it serve you?
True. And I have to say this, I was on Twitter this morning sharing some stuff about an episode of the show. And there's the message from the White House that's talking about how people have taken care and they've gotten vaccinated, and how President Biden is going to be making remarks tomorrow. And that the second part of the message basically said that if you haven't been vaccinated, you're in for a long winter of being sick and dead. Mm-hmm. Excuse me? How divisive. And people are like, well, this needs to be said. Does it? I mean, this is just creating more fear, more divisiveness. And is this strain of the virus as bad? I mean, I saw a graph yesterday. Yes, the cases are higher than anything, but the deaths and hospitalization aren't out of control. So the messaging here, once again, it's messaging, makes no sense. And I normally don't talk about the virus that much on the show. But today, apparently, it's a hot button.
Oh, yeah, but it's like I have a friend in Spain. I talk to him very often, and he tells me he used to work for the Spanish. Imagine that, just to make a comparison, as if he had worked for NBC or ABC or NBC, or CBS, like for 40 years. That's the kind of guy. So he worked for one of those media outlets for 40 plus years as a producer, right? And he left because he couldn't, at some point, like 5-6 years ago, he retired, before time. And he said, I can't cope with this anymore, right? And he's telling me, because obviously he knows how everything works from inside, right? It's like you in the insurance business, right? You know exactly what HIPAA is and everything. Yeah. I mean, you know exactly how a restaurant hostess is not the same as, an insurance company's official trying to do the job and trying to get all the legal, release forms and everything, right? So he's telling me, Angel, if you realize this is all like kind of virtual, like the thread is really virtual, but everything is so virtual that regardless of if it's true or virtual, it doesn't matter, like all the mandates, all the speeches from the presidents, which are almost all of them the same, and they eventually will reach the same point, they never go to the legislator. They're just things that they said we're going to do them, and then there's a whole bunch of reactions. I bet you, Donna, that the press releases for tomorrow after the president's speech have already been written.
Yeah. Well, celebrity obituaries are written ahead of time with only certain things left blank, like cause of death and everything. So, I mean, that's been going on. That practice has been going on, I think, since the 60s, if not earlier, because it was much easier to have all that obituary written so they could drop it into the press as quick as possible. So, I mean, when you think about it, we are managed, our lives are managed a lot. But let's talk about you. Since, you know, you come on here to talk about things, and we went off on this really diverse tangent that I'm sure some people are just going to be mortified by, but you actually have an organization called Wisdom for Kids.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, you know, before coming to live here in the US 11 years ago, I was living in Mexico. And when I was in Mexico, I was in charge of several companies, businesses in the entire or parts of Latin America. So I was going to Latin American countries all the time. And the thing is that I was serving, you know, with the companies I was working with, I was serving, you know, different like manufacturing companies all over the territory, all over the continent. And I was, at the same time that I was going there and I was, you know, closing those multi-million-dollar deals and everything with those, you know, large corporations and powerful CEOs, etc. At the same time, and you obviously, if you've been in Latin America, you know this, there's a lot of people that live in poverty. In Latin America alone, there are 81, and that's data from 2012, 81 million kids live in poverty in Latin America, 81, okay? And that's 45% of the entire kids population. So it was 2015, 1 year before I left corporate America, and I had this experience, this spiritual epiphany or experience, I don't know how to say it. You know, suddenly one morning I woke up and I felt really stressed, and I went to the shower and I started to have all those, you know, visions and things of all these moments in which I was going to Latin America and I was seeing all those kids living in poverty. All those kids that when I was going to visit these powerful people in those plants, typically those manufacturing plants would be in the outskirts of the big cities. Guess what? The outskirts of the big cities is where the poverty is where those poor kids live. And those kids would come to my car and say, hey, Senor, can we keep your car safe while you are inside the plant? Will you buy some gum? Will you, do you allow us to clean your car, to wash your car while you are inside? And I would always say yes. So I would always, interact with those kids, very, very openly. So in 2015, I had this experience in which all those CEOs and all those images of all those kids that I had, helped throughout my entire life in Latin America came together, and it was such a powerful message that I said, and I was that day, I remember being literally every single thing that someone would tell me, I would start crying like crazy, when you're so sensitive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I said, I have to do something. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start reaching out. I mean, I've learned so much about business. I've learned so much about what happens in this region. Why not starting to teach underprivileged kids in Latin America become entrepreneurs using the local resources? I reached out to a friend. My friend still remembers that he was in bed that day. It was 10:30 p.m. on a Saturday. I called him and I said, hey, I would like to do that. Would you be open to do that with me? He's from Mexico. He lives in Mexico. I was already living here. And he said, yes, absolutely. Let's do it. And then he brought his father in, and all three of us started Wisdom for Kids. And we started it in 2017, 2018. And then, we proof tested, what was the best activities that we could do with the kids. And then we piloted them, and we went to different kinds of communities. We went to suburban communities. We went to rural communities, and we went to indigenous communities. And we started to see how we should really, teach the kids to become entrepreneurs, why it is so important to have them use their local resources to be able to start a journey of as an entrepreneur, how to show, how to present that experience and knowledge of us so that they would engage with it. And we came up with a workshop which is extremely powerful, very energy based. It's not like whiteboarding or blackboarding, a content of how to become an entrepreneur or how to set up your own business. No, it's a very, very energy related, workshop that gets them started in their entrepreneurial journey. And I'm happy to say, obviously, 20 something months, we had to stop all the activities because we cannot go to any community, unfortunately. They all closed down. Only our local volunteers can do something, but also very limited. As you know, there's people, we live in cities and we see the world differently, but the people in rural communities, many of them have been isolated for 2 years now, which is crazy. Can you imagine entire families isolated? And they might be a little bit lucky because they're in the countryside, right? And they have all the resources that they need to survive. They live in the countryside, so they might have some animals, they might have some plants, they might have some produce, they might have some, fruits, but they have been isolated. But anyway, the thing is that we were able, before the close down, let's say, we were able to help more than 1,000 kids in Latin America to become entrepreneurs using the local resources. I am the president, and we are 2 more, co-founders, and we are super excited to be, an agent of change to those communities that we have visited.
And I think you touch upon something in the story here about the fact that there's so many, we see the immigration, we see all these people immigrating, and people are up in arms about it and everything because, well, they have their own country. But if they're living in poverty and they're trying to find hope, then, we're all human. And I know we all have limited resources, but, we have to look at humanity. And that's one of the biggest things. We have to look at humanity now.
Yeah.
We really do.
And again, it's, why are we asking the wrong questions? I couldn't resonate more with you, what you just said. We can, again, how can you, again, it's nowadays, every single discussion becomes political, which is crazy, Donna, and it doesn't have to. No. Who wouldn't, really, who doesn't have or has had maybe some Latin American, because everybody's discussing about the border and hundreds of thousands of Latin Americans coming. Obviously, I love Latin America for a million reasons, right? And I understand that people are concerned about so many people coming into the country, but what are the right questions that we should be asking? If that's the need, right? If we have always, how many people have helped me with my house, with my pool, with my landscaping, with my repairs? How many handymen came home and they were from America? These people are, hard workers.
Right.
We all of us know someone who comes. So why do we have to politicize something, knowing that they are just as humans as we are, as good of humans as we are, and they have issues? Okay, so why don't we discuss the issues that they have and we try to solve them, all of us together as humanity, as you said? Why don't we try to solve the problems together?
And here's something to think about. Some of the reason they have such problems down there is because of us, because of the drug war we started down there, because of all the little, gun running that we were part of down there. But we don't want to take ownership of that. We don't want to take ownership because, oh, well, we did something. No, we don't want to admit that we did something because we can erase history. And therefore, we don't want to take responsibility. And that's the problem. We did it with Vietnam. We did it with a lot of different things. We started these wars. We inserted ourselves somewhere we shouldn't have. The Gulf is a nice example of that. And I'm not saying I'm against vets, because I'm not. I just don't believe in war, especially war when it's not really needed. Because once again, it goes back to humanity. Exactly. Sure, there's some bad people in this world, but if we could get away from greed and violence and embrace people and be more concerned about compassion and love and people instead of the almighty dollar, things might be better. I'm going to say one last political thing here. We have people in power that have no concept of what it's like to be homeless. There's a person whose show I'm going to be on this afternoon, and she was on my show and her episode dropped today. And she talked to me about some people that she knew that were homeless. And she said one guy she talked to, he was an engineer, and he admitted while he was talking to her, because she knew he was tweaking, that he was on drugs. And he says, look, I wasn't on drugs until after I became homeless. I was an engineer. Same thing with a woman that she talked to. And both of them basically said they do drugs now because they are terrified that somebody's going to come along if they fall asleep. They wouldn't be able to stay awake for days, that they're either going to get robbed and in the woman's case, raped. So, but we look at them and we judge them just by seeing them on the street. We don't look at the circumstances as to why. I had another guest who he would actually sit down with a homeless person and ask them what their favorite food was. And I know this may sound cliche or ridiculous, but ask them what their favorite food was. And then he would go get their meal and it would be their favorite food. And he would sit down and talk to them and have a real conversation and get to know them. He was showing them true compassion. So why can't we have more compassion instead of being so freaking divisive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I can tell you right now, I started out in insurance as a mail file clerk and moved my way to receptionist all the way up to being a supervisor. And the fact is, because I had started at those underling positions, I knew what those people went through.
Yeah.
I knew what that job was. If you go straight into a power position, you have no concept and you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
You're sold to the highest bidder and you're happy about it because you're rolling in the dough.
Yep.
So people can get mad at me for being political. I apologize for those,
okay.
But
exactly. So that's why, what do we do? I mean, okay, so this is what we have. What do we do? Mm-hmm. And I think that compassion is a great, place to be. And again, because we all want to thrive. We all want to, have a great life. We all want to, live in a up to a certain level of abundance and being able to live a nice life, not to be concerned about, if I'm going, to have my ends meet or not at the end of the month, whatever, not to live, paycheck to paycheck. I mean, we all want to do that. The thing is with what's happening right now, how can we help each other to make that happen? How can we do that? How can we do that?
Yeah.
That's why the answer is never like before, probably never like before. It's inside of us. It's not outside. The answer is inside. That's why compassion comes to the surface. It's really because you could be them, and actually you are them. It's been shown. I mean, as you know, there's many neuroscientists and epigenetics experts that have said that if you conduct intention or love intending experiments, you are able to change things at the other side of the planet. There's people that have done experiments, have run experiments of literally hundreds of people intending for something, using their love and their compassion to change something at some other side in the world of the planet, and they have been able to do it.
Nice.
They have been able to change it. I mean, there's many people that have done that. So every single good thing that we do has an effect in mankind. So let's start doing it. Let's look inside and let's help each other genuinely. I would maybe, because the same as you, I think that one of the things I'm forcing myself to do right now is to do to help people, like pro bono. Like I'm going to help that person with that just because I want them to succeed. I'm over delivering. Every single client I have right now, I have never over delivered as much as I have or as I am today, just because I know everybody's going through something. Everybody. I really want to help everybody, and I really want to do myself, and also probably, I'm tipping more people now than before. I've increased the amount. I know that, salaries are not maybe, as much as they used to be before. I know that also people change jobs more often. I mean, the whole labor market has changed. There's lots of things going on. So, I mean, just try to do good more systematically. And I think that that's one of the starting points of this new paradigm that we're building all together. That's why it's so important when you share this experience, this knowledge, everything. I mean, I think it's humanly acceptable that we have these conversations, and acknowledging that maybe others are divisive, we are not. How to build bridges? How can we build a bridge between, people that think this and people that think that? Okay, so what could be a middle ground? How can we go back together, not build back together, but go back together, really, but in reality? Because one thing is to say it and the other one is to do it, which is crazy, right?
Right.
So how can we really get back together? So the answer is very easy. Start doing small things for people around you, for your neighbors, for your relatives, for your friends, and you can do that immediately. You can do that immediately. I mean, right now, after listening to this episode, go somewhere, knock at someone's door, make a phone call. Something that we don't do anymore is just calling someone out of the blue. Isn't it crazy? Do you remember when you had a phone at home and suddenly rang? You were excited.
I still have a phone, but nobody calls me. I mean, they call me on my cell, but that's the thing. And doing that. And one thing I have to say is reach out to somebody, but don't do it with gratitude and don't expect anything in return. Exactly. That's a big caveat, because you have the people that are helping, but then they're filming it. And you don't necessarily have to do that. You don't have to do that. And I want to talk to you real quick about the fact that you were talking about the job market changing. I think our instant gratification society is starting to wane just a scotch for two reasons. I live in a small town, but we have a main drag through our town. And there's been a McDonald's there that's been open 24 hours since I've lived here. Well, since the pandemic now, they can't find anybody who work late. McDonald's was closed the other night at 10 o'clock at night, which is we used to be open till 11 when I worked there. Not this one, but back in the 80s. So that's already changing. That the instant gratification, the fact that we had tornadoes here and an Amazon, not in my town, but in Illinois, Amazon had a facility. They didn't even plan for the disaster. They didn't say to their employees, hey, you need to seek shelter. They didn't plan for this. People died because somebody needed a package. So maybe we need to start looking at humanity. There was a thing a while back that I think it was Walmart that had taken policies out on their employees, life insurance policies. So if they died, they got paid. We are not a commodity. We are people. And the thing is, and this is why we have to appreciate humanity more too, is because how much AI is now taking over things. Oh, an AI can write your blog post. Really? But I mean, there's no nuance in there. And AIs can do jobs. Yes, AIs can cut the grass. Yes, they can take inventory. That's all awesome. But there's not a human factor. And humanity, if we want to really survive, we have to be kinder to each other.
Oh, totally. And it's already happening. Again, I think that because I'm interacting with people from different continents every week, and I see that more and more and more. People are, okay, so this is what's happening in the outside. Okay, so let's make sure that I take care of my people. I take care of as much as I can, right? As much as I can. You mentioned that, unfortunate incident with the tornado and the Amazon, Illinois, in warehouse in Illinois. But just the other day, there's a company that delivers, groceries home, right? And they had a big issue with one of their IT systems. And they sent an email saying, okay, so the groceries that you have been waiting for the last 5 days will not make it this week. Okay. And I said, and then they said, the reason why this happened is, and in full disclosure, they said, this is what happened. Unfortunately, we couldn't plan ahead and we didn't anticipate that was going to happen. We didn't have a contingency plan. So you're going to have your groceries late. And you know what I did? I sent a message to one of the customer service agents that is in touch with me. And I told him, thank you very much for that message.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so blunt, honest to share with me the mistakes that you made. That makes me sure that in the future, you're going to do as much as you can to serve me. I will be your client forever.
Right.
And he was surprised because he got hundreds of complaints of people that weren't getting their groceries.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Then there's the other side of that of people just complaining about it because they've been inconvenienced. But the whole thing is, if somebody's delivering groceries to your house, guess what? That's a convenience. You could go to the store yourself and get your groceries. So there's no reason to complain.
But that's, again, it's all about being more human.
Yeah.
Being
and the perception.
Human. Yeah. And the perception. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the perception. How do you take it?
Yeah.
You know, and I have to acknowledge, I mean, this insanity going on in social media that you mentioned, it's happening. I mean, I think that I am perceiving, and as much as an optimist that I am perceiving this lack of patience in people, you know, I am perceiving it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to live with that, right? We have to accept it, and we have to try to make sure that we live with it and still be who we are, and, you know, be there for the people that, okay, so if they're not patient, you know, what can we do for them? You know, as much as we can. And if we cannot do anything, you know, I mean, compassion does not work for everybody either.
No.
You know, so we have to, again, it's just keep going, you know, keep using our love as much as we can, our compassion. And we will get over this. I mean, I'm 100% sure. I'm so confident, Donna, that we will get over this much sooner than we think. Really, much more soon than we think.
Most likely. I mean, in time, it'll all turn and move forward, and we'll be in a better place. We will.
Definitely.
So on that note, is there anything that I haven't covered with you that you would like to add?
No, thank you. Obviously, just thank you for your kindness, for allowing me to be here and to exchange maybe some ideas and some, you know, just a different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I would like just to share my email address if anybody wants to share, you know, to share their thoughts with me. It's very easy. It's Angel, ANGEL, at angelribo.com. Last name Ribo is RIB as in boy O. Again, my email address is angel@angelribo.com. Anybody that wants to send me a message, you know, we are a team here at the company, the CEO Confidant Company, and we will be glad to answer you. If we can be of help in any way, please reach out. I really appreciate your kindness, Donna, for this wonderful conversation today. I think it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. And obviously, thank you, everybody that has been listening to us today, for their patience, if they have made it to the end, right?
Yes.
And, you know, at the end of the day, we are just two human beings, and as flawed or as perfect as anyone else.
Right. We're just having a conversation.
Exactly.
So thank you for chatting with me.
Thank you.
So Angel and I had definitely an interesting conversation, you know, talking about his charity organization. I think it's important that we actually look at humanity. You know, humanity is not just about the vaccine. It's not just about the virus. It's about the economy. It's about people. It's about how do we value life? And there's so many ways to value life, but we always put a label on it. We put a label on who we are. We put a label on what we do. But maybe we need, as I've said before, to strip those labels away and be an individual, be who we are, and then embrace our humanity and do better and do good. I'm not going to sit here and give you a big lecture today because that was pretty heavy conversation. So if you like the podcast, or if you have a question or a comment, as I'm sure some of you may have a comment about this episode, you can reach me at Donna, DAUNA, at better2podcast.com. That's Donna at better2podcast.com. All of our episodes are at better2podcast.com. If you want to follow us on the social media apps, we have those links on the Better2 page as well. If you want to check out what guests are coming up, you can find that at dmneedom.com under Better2 Podcast. And on that note, I hope you enjoy the show, and I hope you have a great day. I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.